Welcome to another episode of Third Saturday in October, your SEC Tailgate podcast for the rest of us. Chris, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. I am pumped to listen to you and a former friend, or not former friend, former classmate, dorm mate, talk about all things football and just the blast from your past that we're talking about today on the show.
Yeah, so my old roommate Billy from Baylor, Billy and Bradley from Baylor. Little information that we didn't share. We had kind of an unofficial fraternity called Beta Alpha Beta, Billy and Bradley. I think it's still a Facebook group, though not active. But he comes on the show just to talk about our time at Baylor, being super fans, tailgating, and just life around football in Texas, really all of Texas. But it's a lot of fun. But be sure to join us on social media at TSIO Pod on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Find us on YouTube as well. Because if you're not watching the YouTube version of this episode, there may be a picture or two of Billy and I in our tailgating days that are in that video that you can't see elsewhere. So be sure to find us on YouTube as well. Also, next week, Saturday the 26th, we're going to be doing a Zoom virtual tailgate for the primetime games. So be sure to go to thirdsaturday.inoctober.com to sign up for that. We got some more details about it at the end of the show. But let's jump right into this conversation between me and Billy on tailgating in the Big 12. But we're a tailgating podcast. It'll be okay.
Love it. Let's do it.
Well, welcome, Billy, my old college roommate, to Third Saturday in October. We both went to Baylor. I was there for half of my college career. Billy was there for his entire college career, even some post-grad stuff. But we early on got into some football super fandom, I guess. We did the whole painting up for games, that sort of thing. So I wanted to have him on just to talk about college football. I mean, Baylor's starting this weekend, right? They're ready to play some football.
Yeah. So I think we were supposed to have a game this past weekend, but it got postponed. I don't know why I didn't look into it too heavily. This is sort of pre-conference, so I'm not really paying attention right now. But yeah, I think we're supposed to be starting this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, Big 12 is really the Big 10, but that name's already taken, so we'll just stick with our old name, the Big 12. So we'll add some non-conference games in there. We won't hold that against them too much.
It's a little out of our norm to be talking about something other than SEC, but you two have such a storied past and again, that super fandom that we got to dive into that. So yeah, I think that
we got some stories, to say the least.
I think that with any of the just conversations around college, it's just dive in, man. Let's have fun. The tailgating podcast for the rest of us, we can talk about something other than SEC, especially when it's Baylor. I love Baylor.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Billy?
Good. I was just going to say, I apologize to any of your listeners who are diehard SEC folks. Refer to UT as University of Tennessee, versus what I'm used to down here in Texas. But, down here in Texas, I'm up in Chicago now. But, yeah, man, this is going to be fun.
Well, I've got a long list of reasons why Tennessee is the real UT. But we'll save that for another day. We'll get a Texas fan on here, and I'll just school them in.
I'm down. I work with an Austin transplant, so I'll bring him in. He'll wear his Texas gear. You guys can have a good old argument, and then he'll probably quit my company after realizing the type of friend I keep.
Hey, if we just need to help you along, we can do that. I am wearing my Baylor line jersey that I found in a box of stuff at my mom's house. To be completely honest, Mom found it in a box of my stuff at Mom's house. But just the Baylor line, I don't know if it's a Texas thing or just a private school thing, but it's this lineage of Baylor students, kind of passing the torch off, literally and figuratively, to the next class of Baylor students. But they just a little bit of history of me with the Baylor line. Coming in, loving Tennessee football. Yeah, football. Really not knowing anything about Baylor football, not knowing that at the time we were no good. This was pre-RG3 days, where our best player was Daniel Sepulveda, a punter. And he was about the only one big enough to actually play football. But went to line camp, where you just get introduced. It's like orientation, but for 4 or 5 days. Went to orientation, learned how to do the official Sick 'em Bears thing, where you take your hand, you put it on your knee, and that makes the good bear claw. And
I see.
You're taught to rip open the chest, then bat the heart out, and give them a good old Sick 'em Bears. So
now, is that where you two met?
I got to tell you, Baylor.
Go for it.
No, we met in the dorms. So Bradley and I were floor mates. Oh no, frozen Billy. Well, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
We were floor mates. I'll turn on video here. We were. I'm very good when I'm on camera. We were floor mates. We were not roommates. So we met in the dorms. And I was just going to say, I always thought it was hilarious that when they taught you how to do the Sick 'em Bears, they made you put your hand on your knee. Now, Baylor is made up of a lot of very smart students. I mean, just look at the cheering section at a basketball game. It's very nerdy relative to the rest of the Big 12, folks. But the fact that they teach you how to make a bear paw by putting your hand on your knee, as opposed to just knowing that you can curl your fingers in a specific way, I always thought that was hilarious. Like, you got to put it on your knee, guys. Otherwise, you can't do a curved hand right.
I mean, it works perfect. I don't know. It's like, just put your right hand on your knee. Okay. Now keep that same hand shape and lift it up. Okay, that's your bear claw. Got it. Okay. Yeah, that was.
I wonder what allowed them to get to the point where they're like, guys, we just got to tell them, everybody put your hand on your knee, because if not, we're getting all sorts of weird claw shapes, and it's just not worth it.
I guarantee there's some meeting where all of the folks who are responsible for leading line camps are like, well, guys, we really need to set up a multi-step process for these kids for how to do the Sick 'em Bears. Most of these kids have parents who have gone here, so they know exactly what it is. But I feel like we just need to fill time. So let's think of the 5-step process. We'll write it down and we'll teach them the 5-step process, because I got nothing else to teach these kids today.
Hey, I mean, I had no idea who Baylor was until literally driving from Austin to Dallas to go. I guess I had visited Texas, and then I was going to visit maybe TCU. So I was going to Fort Worth. And we just happened to see Baylor University on the side of I-35. And we literally pulled over, just kind of walked through and said, hey, let's come back. Because I wanted to go west. I just wanted to get out of Nashville. Mom wouldn't let me go to California. So Texas was as far west as I could go. So I looked at a bunch of Texas schools. And I mean, Billy wasn't even looking at Baylor at first. Were you looking at Tech?
No, barely. So I put in applications to Texas Tech, which is where a lot of my dad's side of the family went. I've got just as many fan stories about going to Texas Tech football games as I do about Baylor at this point. TCU up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then and Baylor. I was telling Bradley before, I didn't even do campus visits for any of those. I was very laissez-faire about the entire college application process. I think I performed at a jazz band concert once on campus at Baylor when I was in high school. Thought it was beautiful. Knew a couple of folks who had gone there and just applied, but I was a lot less interested in the college search than you were.
Well, I just wanted to. I mean, really, I wanted to see something different. But funny story about how Billy and I actually met. We didn't realize maybe right before school started, we'd played like flag football together, just in one of the quads on campus right outside the dorm. But the first time that I realized, hey, this kid may be kind of cool, is we had the same English class. And first day of English, man, I got myself into some trouble. So we're sitting outside the class, and I can't remember. I said something snarky, and to just somebody that was sitting outside class with me, not realizing once we got into class that was our professor, because he was really young. Yeah, Mikowski or something, I think was his
Reed
name.
Mikowski, and
That's
I'm pretty
right.
sure, my memory, if memory serves, I'm pretty sure we were outside waiting for a class to end so we could go in. He said
Yep.
something about how he was the teacher. He was a grad student. You know, he wasn't like a fully fledged associate professor or anything. But he had mentioned he was a teacher, and you were like, "No, there's no way. You're too young." And
What's
he
it? I was
kind
like,
of
yeah, right.
he
Yeah,
kind of
right.
clammed up.
And then he
Yeah.
started class and taught the whole time. And I was like, oh no, I'm screwed. And I think it did affect my grade. But he went around, and two things I remember from that class are, one, being left-handed. There was one left-handed desk in that class, but it moved every class. And so I sat in a different place, and it just ran around. But the first day, it was kind of right as you walk in, that first row in the very back. But he said, hey, I want you to say your name, where you're from, your major, your favorite book, and your favorite movie. And it started, I think Billy went second. He said, I'm Billy Collins. I'm from San Antonio. At the time, he was a pre-med major. This is a different Billy. And he said, my favorite book is Count of Monte Cristo. My favorite movie is Pirates of the Caribbean. And it went around, and it got to me. And I said, I'm Bradley Minigan from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a business major. And that jerk over on the other side of the classroom took my favorite book and favorite movie. And from then on, we just started hanging out. So kindred spirits from the very beginning.
Well, there are going to be several probably apocryphal stories here, so you're going to have to check my memory. But I remember something. I remember a third story from that class, which was there was one day, I think early in the semester, where you got up on top of one of the desks and tried to change the clock to a different time for some reason.
Because he was late.
Do you remember this? And he was late, and he walked in while you were standing on the desk trying to change the clock.
Because as a teaching assistant or whatever, we had 10 minutes. I guess professors had, full-fledged professors had 15 minutes that they could be late. But if he didn't show up in 10 minutes, we could leave early. And I was trying to change it so that it would be 11 minutes, like, hey, we can go. And I got caught.
I mean, any high school kids out there who are listening to this thinking like, wow, college is where the big boys go to learn and do things smart. It's summer camp for the first 2 years.
It would have been smart if it had worked. If he had been 60 seconds later, it would have been grand. But
it's true.
He also said,
Bradley, you've turned yourself into a pretty respectable individual these days, but it sounds like you were a rabble rouser in freshman year.
Well, my wife just likes to say I'm sneaky, and and I wasn't so sneaky on that day. But
you were learning. You were piloting early ideas that would eventually serve you well into adulthood.
Yeah. Well, and
that's a nice way to put all that.
So, Billy, you're telling me, and I don't think I realized this, you didn't get a Baylor line jersey. You didn't fork over the $30-$40, whatever it was. You didn't run in the Baylor line?
Nope. Never ran in the Baylor line. And part of it was, Baylor does this really cool thing, and I don't know what other universities do when they start the school year. But Baylor does this really interesting thing that you alluded to, Bradley, called line camps. And for incoming freshman students, you could go do one of these line camps a week, 2 or 3 before school year starts. And some of them are like, I know one of the guys on our floor, Jeff, did one that was a little bit more outdoorsy, kind of an outdoor adventure led thing. You did the one where you got to move in like the week before and kind of do a little bit more learning.
My parents wanted to get me out of the house early. They said, why don't you
Yeah.
go to this line camp? And, you get to move in a week early. Okay, whatever, fine, college, woohoo. Yeah, but you didn't do any of those?
Nope, I didn't do any of those. And so I think I missed out a lot on like what makes sort of the Baylor freshman traditions special, right? Like you were talking about this whole lineage of what the Baylor line meant and why it's so specific to Baylor. And I just kind of missed out on a lot of that stuff. Not that I probably would have enjoyed it a ton if I had played around with it or whatever, but so I missed out on a lot of it. But then when I started going to football games, I realized that that almost the entire freshman population runs in the line. So if you want a good seat where the freshman section is, you didn't run in the line. You just stood next to the freshman section. And when they opened it up for the line to come in, you just kind of snuck in front of everybody and you get a front row seat. So I just cheated the system that way. I didn't run in the line, but I got great seats.
Well, I think I ran in it once or twice, and you get to run onto the field, and then you form a spirit line. And for Tennessee listeners, the band forms the T, and the team runs through it. This is a less glorified version of that, but it's just a bunch of students, and the football team runs through them. Yeah, that year I think we won 4 games. Wahoo! Or no, that was RG3's year. I think we won 1 game.
We won 1
our freshman year, and
yeah.
But yeah. So the Baylor line got to then all the freshmen run into the student section, and you're at the top of the student section. The seats are awful. So I got together with Billy and said, "Hey, why don't we, start painting up?" And being those college guys, painted chest, we're ripped, whatever. And that way we can get front row seats. So we started showing up early and, bringing the paint in. We get 4 or 5 guys together with us, spell out Baylor or Bears. Our worst decision was this was mid to late October. And it's hot in Texas. So a lot of the Baylor games, all the Texas games get played at night when it's cooler. So for the first 4 or 5 games, they were all night games. And then we paint our chests, just the 2 of us, BU for Baylor University. But we forgot sunscreen. And we get back to the dorms. And we, showered, and I noticed, hey, it seems like not all the paint's washing off. And then I look in the mirror and it's just sunburn. My skin is red, and then I've got this pasty white bead just burned into my chest. And I take off down the hall and I said, Billy, he said, you too? And he had a big U burned into his chest. Not the smartest decision we ever made.
Yeah, so that sunburn was with us well into Christmas break, and obviously you're wearing more clothing during the winter, even though it's Texas, and so there were no chances for that sunburn to go away for months on end. See, we definitely evolved in our sophistication around painting, because I think, if my memory serves, that was the first game we actually painted. It was a random day game because it was homecoming, and it might have been on TV. And so they didn't want to put Baylor in the primetime slot. So they put us earlier in the day. So it was probably like a 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock game, sun's high in the sky, really, really hot day. And we only painted the letters. We didn't paint the whole body. We barely touched the face. And it was just the 2 of us. It was very, very early in our ability to do school spirit.
Yeah, it was not pretty. The other thing,
how did that evolve over time for you too? Did you
whole body paints? Man, it evolved a lot. So freshman year, I think we might have tried
waist up. We weren't doing, the Speedos and paint from our head to our toes kind of thing. We're never that crazy.
Oh, like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition version of collegiate painting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we stopped short of that. I think freshman year we might have done it once or twice, and part of the reason was because we learned our lesson and realized that painting that way was just going to make us hurt more than it was going to help anybody, including the football team. But then sophomore year, we had gathered a pretty good community, and we started bringing a couple of guys out. We would do, whole body and face. Everybody would have a different face pattern, and we would spell out Baylor on the front and Bears on the back.
That's
And
right.
so we had it fully coordinated. It was great.
Yeah. And people didn't understand it because when we're facing the field, Bears on our back is spelled backwards. I'm like, what's the deal? It's like, it's so when we just turn around, it spells
SRAM!
the cameras. We don't care about y'all. We care about the cameras.
And I'll tell you this, a lot of people didn't get it because there was nobody else painting. At the time, we were
true.
very early to the paint yourself up for a football game phase because we were still in the student section with a bunch of freshman people wearing their line jerseys. And that's what qualified for school spirit with a football team that won 1 to 2 games a year. But you talk a little bit about heritage, and you got to correct me on this one. But one of my recollections of that sophomore year, where we were going to every game, we were painting up, we were trying to lead the spirit charge, was we used to do. Oh gosh, it was an Ozzy Osbourne song, right? That the band would play, and we would do like the dun 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 dun. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I forget the song, but there was a song where there was like a coordinated fan kind of like motion thing, and it's like we were trying to like take down the competition or whatever, but it was just like quarter note beat after quarter note beat of like this thing that just went on and on and on. And I remember our group of people, every time the beat would hit, we would yell the word kill. And we would turn around and we would start to get other people to yell the word kill. Well, I'm watching Baylor football a couple of years ago, and they're filming the student section do that thing, and everybody is yelling kill. And I turn around to my wife and I'm like, we started that.
We were ahead of our time.
Nobody believes me that we started that. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we started that, right? Like, do you remember that like I do?
Yeah. I mean, we would do stuff like that. That was somebody in our group's idea. Can we get royalties from that? Does Big 12 Network pay for that kind of stuff?
I wish, right? That would be great.
But
I'm going to have to find out that song because I'm pretty sure I'm getting it wrong.
Was it Kashmir by Led Zeppelin? The way that you were describing it almost sounded like that.
Yep, it's Kashmir. I don't know why I thought it was a Black Sabbath song.
Well, and Baylor being the big Baptist university in Texas, I mean, we played Metallica's Enter Sandman when the team ran onto the field. I don't know if they would have let us play Black Sabbath or Ozzy tunes.
Probably not.
We did have Darth Vader's march from Star Wars, but who does?
Yeah, that was played like, I swear, 77 times a defensive stand. I mean, we had like the band played like 3 different songs back then, and it was just, it was painful after a while. Oh, well,
here's one of the other interesting things that is no longer true at Baylor, but was when we were there. The stadium, the football stadium, was off campus. And I don't mean it was, here's campus, across the street is the stadium. No, it was miles away. It was in Waco. It wasn't on campus like it is now, where it's just across the river. You can walk there from any part on campus. No, we either had to bus over students. There was a student bus that took students over, or we would just all pile in cars and we had to drive. It was probably a 10-minute drive to get there. And talk about just not good for student attendance. It's like, I got to drive. I got to park. There was special student parking. You show your ID and, okay, we'll let you in this lot. But then to get back, you're sitting in all this traffic. I'm glad they finally built that new stadium. I have not been there yet. I've walked around the outside. It's huge. But it's not like it was when we were there.
Yeah, and I think that's why you and I felt so invested for those 2 years that we were kind of living together to be a big part of the spirit, because ultimately, like, they really entrust the student section where we were sitting to provide a lot of the, atmosphere for what's going to happen during the game, because you look across the field. So student section was sitting on the visitor side right behind the visiting team's bench, obviously, so we could make a lot of noise and get them upset, in whatever way we could. But you look across the field of the home team side, we've got a lot of season ticket holders, a lot of families, stuff like that. And it's pretty boring over there. Ain't no people standing up doing big chants. They might do a sick 'em bears every so often, but we're the ones responsible for bringing the thunder. And I think you and I went to enough games freshman year to realize that, like, even in our own student section, people were leaving early. They were getting bored. They weren't really kind of buying in towards the end of the games. And we're like, you know what? We just want to have fun, right? We just want to have a good time. If we're going to be here, we're going to do this right. Even though we were no good, it's like, we're just going to do this thing.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, because this was the seasons of 2005, 2006. Tennessee was still relevant for the most part. I remember, because they wouldn't give SEC scores usually in the stadium on the screens. They would just give Big 12 scores. I would get text messages from my family. It's like, hey, update me with any score changes if Tennessee was playing at the same time as Baylor. And so I remember checking my phone all the time. But you're right. People went to Baylor games not to watch Baylor, but to watch number 1 Oklahoma, number 1 Texas, top 15 Texas Tech, top 15 Texas A&M. But never to watch a good Baylor team. Now I think it's different. Now, with no fans in the stadiums for pro football and some college football, you see those tarps stretched across the seats, and we had an entire end zone that was that way, except for, I think, Texas and maybe A&M games, because they brought enough fans in that we could actually open up the entire stadium. So it was only partial capacity and not even filled then for 6 games of the year. And then that 7th game, finally people show up.
Was A&M
totally
part of Big 12 at that point?
Yeah, so
A&M
in Missouri were in the Big 12. That's until I think after I graduated.
Yeah. A&M, Big 12 was predominantly a Texas conference for a really, really long time. I forget the name of the conference that it was before it eventually evolved to the Big 12. But yeah, for the entire time Bradley and I were there and we were all in college, it was Texas, Baylor, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and then the 2 Oklahoma schools in the Big 12 South, and the smattering of the Kansas States, things like that.
Nebraska was in the Big 12 at that point.
Yeah, they were. Missouri. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, it's definitely changed. I mean, West Virginia, TCU are part of the conference now. A&M's SEC, which I love. I like watching A&M in the SEC a lot.
Yeah. When A&M and Missouri came to the SEC, I thought, well, I'm glad A&M's in the West. Missouri, we'll be fine with Missouri. And now I think they went to the SEC championship game their first or second season.
Their first year, yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
They were beating Tennessee, or at least keeping it close the couple of years that we did beat them. But I wasn't happy about that, SEC. That was a bad move on y'all's part.
Well, I would love to hear. Oh, good. Keep going.
I was just going to say, I just kind of turned the conversation back to our experiences. Sophomore year, Bradley and I were both dating girls who lived in the same apartment. But it was also the year that we were painting up a ton to go to football games. And I distinctly remember feeling like super awkward about my loyalties about halfway through the season. Cause like this gal I was dating was in the stands and maybe we wanted to go to the games together. But I also had this really tight knit group of guys who I felt extremely loyal to. And like, it was this battle between 19, 20-year-old Billy and his aspirations in the dating arena versus 19, 20-year-old Billy who felt like he was carrying the weight of school spirit on his shoulders every Saturday morning.
We didn't end up with any of those girls, so what does it matter?
No, huge
Oh,
waste of
Well,
time. Probably some of my first Facebook photos are pictures of those games where I just have legit conflict on my face, I'm sure. Nah, babe, I got to go down there to the front row where I'm important.
oh, well, I mean,
if I don't,
you
who
did feel
will,
important,
babe?
don't you?
That's right.
Oh
I would
man.
love to hear from both of you too. Like you paint up, you're doing all that, you do that for a lot of games. But because so many games were at night, like you were saying earlier, because of the weather there in Texas, what did game day look like? Because it seems like you had most of the day before you headed off to the game. So what did game day or tailgating look like for all of you?
I don't. Most of the tailgating was trying to figure out who's going to the game, who's riding with who. Because it was off campus, the whole tailgating atmosphere just felt really non-existent. And I think
Hmm.
couple that with a team that had not been winning in recent decades. Um, I think it was the Southwestern Conference that they were in before the Big 12.
I think you're right.
Mhm.
The last championship that Baylor had was in the early to mid 70s, maybe. So a lot of that had kind of died down. But, um, I think it was trying to figure out how we're getting to the game, who's painting, oh crap, we need to go buy more paint, that sort of thing.
Now, I will say though, so Bradley and I were both unaffiliated, which means we didn't pledge fraternities. But by sophomore year, we had a good friend who had pledged and was part of one of the on-campus Christian fraternities that had a lot of our friends in it as well. But so there was a dedicated tailgating area for students where a lot of the fraternities and sororities, I believe, set up kind of tents or whatever,
That's
and folks
true.
would congregate there before the games. So partway through the season, we just started joining him and his buddies. They were some of the folks that ended up painting up with us. But we did start having sort of the regular tailgating experience as much as you could, like you were saying, at an off-campus stadium, stuff like that. But we did start having the tailgating experience a little bit. We got a little bit more organized as time went on, I think.
Yeah, when one of our best friends pledged, we kind of had a place to go, but it was just different from what I've seen at Tennessee, at Auburn, what I imagine down at Ole Miss, where it's just tense as far as the eye can see, kind of thing, just hopping around from tailgate to tailgate. But there was some of that went on, and I think now that the stadium's on campus, especially when you see college game day there, and you see more of that happening. I think some of that has to do with a better football program too. But it was, yeah, with a night game, I actually prefer tailgating for that because you don't have to start tailgating at 8 a.m. for an 11 a.m. kickoff.
Yeah.
You can actually have burgers, hot dogs, wings, not for breakfast. Um, but it was different at Baylor, but I still loved it. I I do feel like even though it was a much smaller scale and it took longer, I think we helped re-energize that student section, get it primed for maybe we just got them ready for RG3 and some success
Oh
just a
yeah,
couple years later.
I'd agree with that 100%. And I certainly agree. Having something to do was a big deal. So game day wasn't the spectacle down at a Big 12 Baylor, a decade ago, as game day is at an Auburn or a Georgia or something like that. And so if we had a night game, it's not like there was all this on-campus energy, people doing
Hmm.
things, getting ready for the game. It was kind of a normal, boring Saturday unless you had something that you were invested in. And so to have a night game was a lot of fun, especially if it was on TV. But yeah, at least you had a place to go, right? Like there was some energy, there was the ability to go somewhere. It was a morning game, you just have the rest of your day, and it would be very boring after the game and not much to do.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It just something else they did, which was a rare occasion, but happened more with other sports. If a Baylor sports team won that day, they took the dome of it was
Pat
where,
Neff
yeah,
or the basketball stadium?
no, it was the admin offices. It's where Baylor's
Yeah.
president, where his office was. They would light up the dome green, which is cool. At the time, it was kind of a rare occurrence to see a green dome, but that was a cool thing that they did for Baylor wins for their sports teams. That
I'm
I
really glad. I'm really glad that you went that direction, because when you started talking about other sports and winning and the things that campus or the town might do when Baylor did something good, I thought you were going the direction of like the baseball team, if they got a home run in the seventh inning, Fazoli's would give out like free Fazoli's to the whole crowd, which to me is like,
yeah.
man, there might have been a point freshman year with the football team where like if we kicked a field goal in the game, Taco Bell would give out free meals for a month or something like
Yeah.
that.
No, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure with baseball, at the end of sophomore year, we were getting Fazoli's 2-3 times a week because a home run would be hit. Especially the girls are like, no, we don't want Fazoli's, and Billy and I would just collect all of these Fazoli, free lasagna and breadsticks coupons, and take those and just redeem them. Because hey, we didn't want to pay for food; we'd rather eat free. Just eat Fazoli's 4
That's
times a week.
right. Do you remember when we competed in the championship softball game, intramural softball game, sophomore year?
Well, I remember. Is that when the team got disqualified, so we won by technicality?
Yep. So Bradley and I did play a lot of intramurals together, freshman and sophomore year. And so sophomore year, we played softball. We had a pretty decent team, but through a series of fortunate events, one of the teams got disqualified because they brought in like players from the outside, whatever that means in
Blood in a
college
ringer.
athletics.
No Baylor athlete could play sports, and I want to say they had somebody from the track team or something playing, and so they got disqualified.
So we got to play as either freshman or sophomore. I can't remember what this was, but we got to play in the championship intramural softball game against one of the big fraternity teams. And I have no idea how these playoff brackets work and how we, like a lowly freshman team, ended up against a bunch of juniors and seniors. But we got to play in on Getterman Field, which was the Baylor softball campus right next to the Baylor baseball campus. And we got to play a softball game on that field, and it was a lot of fun. We got crushed, like every single pitch they were hitting home runs. But that was a lot of fun. I mean, we had the opportunity to play on a real Baylor field, in a way that you probably don't get to see every single day. But we did a lot of that. We were into softball. We played flag football a couple of seasons. We even did beach volleyball, which we did surprisingly well in.
I know. I think it was 3-man teams, and it was you, me, and we'd always have to find a third every game. But that
Rarely
was a
had a
blast.
sub.
I remember from softball, your freshman roommate Joey hitting inside the park home run, and then I was up next and just getting dogged because here I was. I had played high school baseball. And so I was kind of making sure everybody was positioned right and all that. And I got dogged because I had to top that an inside the park home run, which I think I did, but I just remember getting razzed. Going back to football, though, there were some homecoming traditions at Baylor that, believe it or not, I didn't take part in most of them. Baylor has this eternal flame, which goes along with the Baylor line, just this lineage of things. And every year the freshmen try to steal the eternal flame. And every year it's unsuccessful except for our freshman year. And I'd like to say that I was the difference, but basically my entire dorm went to go steal this eternal flame. I think I had a test the next day and I said, forget you guys, I'm going to bed. But Billy, y'all succeeded.
We did. we had a group of about 15 guys, and this is specific. It's not the freshman class. It's specific to our dorm. So the dorm that we were in, Brooks, is no longer a thing as it stood back then.
They tore it down at the
they
end of our
tore it
freshman
down.
year. We moved out and it came down.
It may have.
Did they light it on fire
been,
with that eternal flame that you stole?
No, it may have been the last residence hall on campus with known asbestos problems. But I think it was either 4 or 5 floors. I think it might have been 5. It had no elevator like the other dorms on campus did, and it was one of the smaller men's. It was. So we had 12 by 12 rooms. We had 12 by 12 rooms. I could reach across. We had bunks on or loft beds on either side. I could reach across the bed and touch my roommate on the other side of the room. But because of all this, it was sort of like it took on a personality of being sort of where the dejected dudes go when it comes to residence halls, which of course is really not true, right? It's just the guys who applied later, right, and selected their residence hall later than everybody else. But we were the ones who sort of carried on this tradition of trying to steal the eternal flame. And so we got a group of about 15, 16 guys, if I remember correctly, including our RA, like our floor director, who was super clean cut, very Baylor spirit. But we found the eternal flame, which was this probably 24-inch circumference sphere filled with fuel. I mean, just filled to the brim with fuel and a wick on top. And it hadn't been lit, I remember, or it was, I can't exactly remember how we got it, but we found it. It was relatively unguarded. It was probably 11, 12 o'clock at night. We grabbed it. We did a rugby sort of thing where we were just passing it off to each other as we got back to the dorm. And all of us were soaked in kerosene by the end of the night. And we smelled so bad. And anyone who is trying to guess why these morons had been out so late at night, coming in, painted up to be camouflaged or whatever with our surroundings, they knew exactly what we did because the stench was on us that night.
Oh man, I think my roommate was a part of that too, and coming back and may have woken me up and told me, hey, we got it. I was like, that's great. I don't know what you're talking about, and just kind of went back to sleep. But yeah, hearing about it the next day. I mean, there's a picture, and again, this is when Facebook was just getting started, but there's a picture of all the guys who went and stole the flame. And somebody tagged me because my window's in the back of it, in the background of the picture, and I'm tagged in the picture because I'm asleep in the dorm.
To contextualize this a little bit, this would have been our version of trying to steal the Olympic flame while it's making its way to the central stadium for an Olympics, which of course it's not, and nobody really cares outside of Baylor freshmen. But that's how it felt to us that year.
Oh, absolutely. That's those college experiences, though. It may not matter to 99.999% of the rest of the world, but to those people that it matters to, it's the biggest deal in the world.
Yeah, that's definitely how it felt.
Yeah. And now you've answered the question that what is the smell of victory? It's kerosene.
That's right.
Now we know.
That's right.
Now we know.
The smell of victory is kerosene. The smell of failure is a dumpster fire, I guess. I mean,
which sounds like what the football season was that season as well, for those years before RG3 hit the stage.
Before RG3, before Matt Rule, who's now with the head coach for the Carolina Panthers, I guess Art Briles really came and turned things around. But Matt Rule put together something that was a dumpster fire at that point. That quintessential Big 12 offense, I mean, came to life with RG3 and Baylor with the spread offense, run pass options, all that fancy football talk. Has a lot of ties into what happened at Baylor.
Now, and this is right off on the heels of Texas trouncing USC in the national championship.
That's right.
So what did it feel like for you two being on Baylor's campus? Did you feel like Big 12's stepchild, or like that we don't get respect over here because you've got the Longhorns up the road?
Well, I think it did feel like, um, no offense, Vandy, the Vandy of the Big 12, because we were a private school in in a conference where we've got teams vying for national championships year in, year out. And yeah, kind of the redheaded stepchild that's, just a cupcake inside the conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a native Texan who grew up about 60, 70 miles south of Austin, it very much felt that way to me. We were regularly competing against the best in Texas football. And so I wasn't at all surprised that we were as terrible as we were. And I was equally as surprised when we actually got good, how quickly we got good. It was kind of a surprise because I was still on campus doing grad work when RG3 was really crushing it for the team. And the team really turned itself around in a very short span of time. It was very surprising.
Yeah. Growing up in Alabama, football for me was life, especially college football. We didn't have a pro team within 100 or 200 miles in any direction of any sport, much less football. So Alabama or Auburn football was a year-round conversation there. But I always heard growing up, it's like as much as we were diehard football folks, Texans are true. Like that's even a higher rank, especially like at the high school and the collegiate level. So growing up outside of Austin, is that the way it felt for you as well?
I felt like University of Texas for me was very much the end all be all of college sports. I remember vividly watching the Texas USC game, on TV with my family over Christmas break one year, and just thinking like, man, this is the tops. Like being able to watch, this super powerhouse Texas team play a super powerhouse California team, take it right down to the wire. That was the end all be all was University of Texas sports. And I went to a Texas A&M football game. I can't remember who they played, probably a year or two before that when I was in high school. And thinking the same thing, like the way that Texans approach football is, it's second to none. I mean, people have crazy devotion to their college teams.
Well, and it's not just college teams, because wasn't Friday Night Lights based in Texas?
Yeah. Both the movie and the TV show. Yeah.
So what I heard, because actually in Nashville, one of my friends from high school was born and raised in San Antonio as well. But talking about these football stadiums that high schools would share, it's, a couple of high schools share it, and it's tens of thousands of seats. And these places would be packed on Friday nights and Saturday nights just to schedule all the games. But it felt like college games because high school football was so big. And so I think because high school football is so big, and Billy, you were in high school band, marching band, something that I know Texas schools take really seriously are bands. I mean, their marching bands are second to none as well, but that they've got it figured out with this marriage between sports and arts with football and marching band that's really just adds to, it makes it a better product too. Colleges have these marching bands, and that's halftime entertainment. People stay in their seats to watch the marching band. That happens at a high school level in Texas to a different degree than anywhere else I've seen. But it's high school, it's college, it's, they've got a couple pro teams as well. Texans love their football, and I see it, through the whole funnel.
Yeah, put it in perspective a little bit. So my graduating class at Ronald Reagan High School in San Antonio was a little over 660. Every high school in our district, any ISD, was very much the same, which meant that you have a giant pool of kids to recruit football players from. So all the schools are on another level when it comes to performance in football. And yeah, Bradley, like in the bigger districts like I was in, there was a district football stadium that was shared by the 6 to 7 to 8 schools in that district. And so I was at every high school football game from freshman to senior year. And the stadiums were packed. And my high school was very much like the Baylor of our conference or of our district. We probably won 1 to 2 games every single season that I was there. We might've gotten a little good senior year. But even when we were the home team and we occupied the larger side of that stadium, the stadium was relatively full. And it's not just because, they want to see the visiting team who might be good at football. It's because football is the entertainment that you get on a Friday or a Saturday night in Texas.
Yeah, it's unreal. And if you haven't seen, I mean, ESPN sometimes airs the Texas state championship games because they're that good. That product is that good. It makes it on ESPN, or at least one of their alternate channels quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
It as much as I wanted to say that Alabama growing up was this mecca of football, and I think that it is, to look at something like a Texas, Ohio, California, Florida that has multiple big-time programs at every level, whether it's high school, several big-time schools for college, and then moving on multiple NFL teams in all of those states. It's just a religion from the time that you can barely walk all the way until you're rooting for the Cowboys or the Texans at this point, or whatever it may be. There's a transition all the way from barely walking, but I can put on pads and put a ball in my hand, all the way up until watching Deshaun Watson or Dak Prescott on Sundays. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In closing as well, I would love to hear 1 or 2 more stories from you two at the stadium, something that was memorable that sticks out about those Saturdays watching Baylor most often lose, it sounds like, but still having fun in the stadium.
I mean, I think I remember going back and watching some really great teams. Like I said earlier, the number 1 Oklahomas and the number 1 Texas teams playing and seeing some really great athletes come through, basically just because I'm there to watch Baylor and support a team that's maybe going to keep it within 35, maybe. But that was pretty spectacular. And I mean, because Baylor was no good at that point, these players looked superhuman, even more so than when they're matched up. When you've got USC versus Texas, Vince Young's heroics look even better because the players on the other side are good. But when you see him just with regular talent on the other side of the line of scrimmage, he's doing things that nobody else has seen before. So unfortunately, those are some of my memories of Baylor games back in the day.
Yeah, I got 2 experiences. You go back to Daniel Sepulveda, our punter that we had when we were in school, biggest guy on the field by far, except maybe a couple linemen.
Because he was like 6'4", 6'5",
He's a big dude.
230, 240.
He's linebacker, tight end material, and I want to. I don't know this as fact, but I feel like he's even played tight end for the Steelers a couple of times in his short NFL career. But I remember, obviously, not coming from a really big football program. You watch all these other football programs and see how pumped people get about various turning points in games. We didn't really have a ton of turning points because the game was only ever going in one direction away from us. But I do remember vividly watching Daniel Sepulveda spear a guy after punting the ball where it looked like the punt returner was going to return the ball all the way back for a touchdown on special teams. And he just speared this guy to the ground. It was probably one of the hardest hits I remember seeing that entire season by our team. Truly phenomenal. But one of the things that you and I didn't experience together, Chris, you're talking about Texas football. So in 2012, this would have been a while after I had left Baylor at that point. My family, who are all native Texans, we all met in Dallas at Thanksgiving to go watch RG3 face off against the Dallas Cowboys on a Thanksgiving Day game. So we tailgated Thanksgiving dinner at this game. We watched RG3 tear the Cowboys apart. I think it was 38-31, something like that. He threw for over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. And this was like either his first or second season in the NFL. And he absolutely crushed it against the Cowboys team that should have, by all accounts, beaten the Cowboys. But then we turned around and came back to Jerry World 2 days later for the Baylor Texas Tech face-off, and ended up watching. I think we ended up watching Baylor beat Tech that year. But yeah, man, Texas football is there's no trade-off. I mean, if you have the opportunity to do something with it, you grab it by the horns and do it. But it's probably one of my funnest experiences with Baylor and the RG3 team.
That's great. Yeah. And knowing that, this being primarily or majority SEC podcast, that those listening or watching, my love for the Crimson Tide and Bradley's love for the Tennessee Vols is, that's who we pull for. But you having gone to Baylor, would you consider yourself a Baylor fan as a football fan, or do you have another allegiance?
Of all the college teams, I would call myself a pretty diehard Baylor sports fan. Obviously the programs that we have done some very silly and dumb things over the years, but if you can kind of relinquish some of that and just watch them for the performance standpoint, there's nothing that you can't root for there. I mean, you're talking about Matt Rule before, Bradley. I mean, Matt Rule, very stand-up guy, super sad to see him go. Never got to watch him coach in person. Like I did with Art Browse and a couple of coaches before him. But Baylor is not short on inspirational stories of turnarounds. When you look at the variety of different things that they've had to do to kind of overcome mistakes that they've made in the past, they're not short on turnaround Cinderella stories. So I pull for them, for that reason as well.
That's great. Yeah.
I just want to put this disclaimer out there. I did not give up my allegiance to Tennessee while I was at Baylor. I think I mentioned that I was getting text updates from my family of scores. But also, one of my favorite Tennessee T-shirts, I think I've even worn it on this podcast. It's gray. It just says Tennessee across the chest in an arched manner like this. It's got a little bit of yellow paint because I would wear my Tennessee shirt to the stadium, then paint up in green and gold at the stadium. It's got a little yellow paint on it because I had it tucked in my back pocket. But also, it was the beginning of sophomore year. It was the kickoff weekend, I believe, and Tennessee played UCLA. And I'm pretty sure it was UCLA. I watched the game in Billy and I's apartment, and I had my speaker set up with my iPod. Anytime Tennessee had a big play or a touchdown, man, I played the Pride of the Southland band playing Rocky Top. It was just like I was at the stadium. It was. I'm sure Billy was sick of Rocky Top by the end of the first quarter. But I did not give up my Tennessee allegiance when I was at Baylor, though I was a big Baylor fan.
I will vouch for Bradley's allegiances because I want to say it was a weekly thing freshman year that you would remind me and all the native Texans that Davy Crockett, in fact, was a Tennessean and helped save the Alamo.
Yeah, he saved y'all's butt
because of Tennessee. Yeah. Texas would not exist without Tennessee was Bradley's famed quote for a long time.
But Billy, I will say, though, I have heard through the grapevine that Davy Crockett was actually a Vandy fan. So you give and take, not everyone's perfect. So even Davy had his faults.
Well, Billy, thank you so much for joining us this week on Third Saturday in October. It's always great to see you, even if it's just virtually, relive some of our old college stories. So thanks for being here.
This was fun. It's good to talk to some guys from another conference for a change.
Yeah. Well, until I get to talk to you again, sick and bears.
Sick and bears.
Rip open the chest, knock out the heart.
Hand on your knee, lift it up. You got to yell, hey!
Sick 'em Bears.
Sick 'em Bears.
I did it. And I didn't even have to go to line camp.
You didn't have to go to line camp, which at first I thought it was lion camp. I was like, we're the Bears. Why are we going to lion camp? You didn't have to go to line camp. You didn't have to go to orientation. But you did miss out on Dr. Pepper Float Hour. Sorry you had to miss out on that. That was a good thing that was not related to anything else on this podcast, but Dr. Pepper floats for freshmen. Was it every Monday?
Every Tuesday. Every Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, down at the Student Union building.
There's a good documentary on Amazon Prime that I've watched about the allegiance to Texans with Dr. Pepper. So I don't remember all the details right now, but what's the little town from Texas that they had the Dr. Pepper bottling plant that made it with real cane sugar that was different?
Yeah, it's west of Waco now, but Waco's where Dr. Pepper originated. But yeah,
very
I can't
cool.
remember the town now, but I do know people who get it shipped from there to their house because they want it with real cane sugar.
Yeah. Well, this is a blast, Billy. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Man, how awesome was that having Billy on with us?
That was such a blast just to hear your stories and all of the history. And, again, even though it wasn't an SEC specific conversation, that college experience is second to none. And so I loved hearing that from both of you.
And also just, the story about, during the chant yelling kill and something that we're pretty sure we started, and seeing that still alive and well today. One of my more proud moments in my life.
That's great.
But yeah, getting to relive that, talking about the different ways that we just love football and get ready for it is so much fun.
Well, again, being the SEC tailgating podcast for the rest of us, that tailgating to me, that camaraderie, that enjoying each other, having fun, to me is just as much a part of this show as the SEC part. So we always want to bring the fun. We always want to bring that correlation between having fun, especially on game days, with the SEC tied together. But college football in general, it's just a fun sport to be a part of. And I'm so glad to hear some of those stories from your time in college with Billy. So fun.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of tailgating, though we can't really tailgate much on campus. I know Tennessee's allowing some. I think Georgia just announced the other day there's going to be no tailgating on campus. Guess what? It doesn't matter. Next week, on Saturday the 26th, the SEC kicks off. And the SEC Tailgate podcast for the rest of us is going to have an SEC tailgate for the rest of us. So you can be invited. All you have to do is go to thirdsaturday.inoctober.com, sign up to be a part of our VIP tailgate. It's going to be a virtual tailgate. We're going to kick off at 5:30 p.m. Central. Go until the last game that night ends. I know Tennessee's playing South Carolina. Alabama's playing Missouri. I think there are 2 other games happening. It's going to be a free-for-all. Just join our tailgate, hang out. We're going to watch all the games at the same time and basically just kind of be on a conference call like NFL Red Zone. We can just kind of hang out and watch a little bit of everything.
No, I love that.
But I think it's going to be a blast. We're going to give it a shot. So head over to thirdsaturday.inoctober.com. Sign up to get that link. We'll be emailing it out as about Thursday of next week so that you've got time. It's going to be a Zoom call, but I think it's going to be a blast.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something that we want to do on a regular or semi-regular basis throughout the season. Just if we can't all be in person tailgating and having fun and talking about football, let's find as many virtual ways to share our fandom and share our love for college football together, even if it has to be through screens. So yeah, this is going to be a blast. Also, don't forget, while you're there signing up and getting that Zoom link, go ahead and sign up for our Tailgating 101 cheat sheet that you can get by just putting in your name and email address. And, again, virtually, we still want to have the fun, still want to be enjoying ourselves on Saturdays. So make sure you get that tailgating cheat sheet, that 101 for you to, it's got a few recipes on there. It's got some fun things to do. So enjoy that. Enjoy this. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the third Saturday in October. I know I had a blast listening to all of it. And until next time, roll balls, baby.
Roll balls.